This beautiful beach and quaint English creek may look totally harmless, but a trip there could easily cost you your life. See, today we're going to go sightseeing in some of our planet's most inhospitable vacation spots as we explore some of the world's most beautiful places that are too dangerous to visit. Up Strids Creek. The world is full of raging seas and wide rivers, so you might be surprised to learn that one of the most dangerous bodies of water on Earth is an innocent-looking stream in ye old Yorkshire, England. Yep, the Bolton Strid is a 65-mile stretch of the wider River Wharfe that looks like a calm stream on the surface. But what's bubbling underneath is a different story. See, this stream has a 100% fatality rate if you fall in, and there's no barriers to protect you from its deadly waters. But why is it so dangerous? Well, the Strid is surprisingly deep at 213 feet, which is roughly the length of 5 buses stacked end to end. Furthermore, while the river is just 6 feet wide at the surface, its sides are filled with lots of deep underwater caves and tunnels that you can't see from dry land. Finally, as hundreds of gallons of water from the wider parts of the River Wharfe are forced through the narrow Strid, it creates a strong current that will instantly swallow a swimmer up and pen them inside the underwater caverns. If a visitor tries to jump across the seemingly calm narrow stream, they could easily slip on the wet stones. Then when they fall in, they'll never climb out again, because nobody has survived a dip in the Strid. And sadly, a lot of the time their remains stay trapped in the caves and never resurface at all. Man, I guess you should never judge a brook by its cover. Snake Island. Picture the most terrifying animal you can think of. Now imagine being surrounded by thousands of these creatures on a remote island with absolutely no chance of escape. For those of you with snake phobias, this can become a reality at Ilha de Queimada Grande, a beautiful Brazilian island that's filled with thousands of deadly serpents. The terrifying inhabitants are specifically golden lanceheads, an exceptionally dangerous species of pit viper that exclusively lives on the island. The lancehead genus contains 48 species of snakes that cause 90% of all snakebite fatalities in Brazil. And the golden lancehead's venom is so potent it can cause kidney failure, internal bleeding, and melt your flesh. Researchers estimate that 2,000 to 4,000 of them are slithering around the island's 43 hectares, and their bite can take a life in under an hour. So Brazil's government made it illegal for civilians to visit the island in the 1920s. But if any of you troublemakers want to sail there anyway, there are some grisly stories from before the travel ban to deter you. Legend has it that a lighthouse operator used to live on the island until one night he accidentally left his window open and a bunch of vipers came slithering in. The operator, his wife, and 3 children tried to run to a dock to flee the island by boat, but they were jumped by snakes hanging in the branches of a tree and succumbed to the bites. Whether this specific story is fact or fiction, this tropical island is incredibly deadly, and today only researchers are allowed to visit it to study the snakes. Man, even if I could go there, I wouldn't want to in a million years. Freeze the day. With pure white mountains and deer-pulled sleds, Oymyakon is a town in the Sakha region of Russia that feels like a real winter wonderland. But whilst it looks like the perfect place to spend the holidays, visiting it could easily cost you your life. See, it's regarded as the coldest town in the world, as winter temperatures average a spine-chilling negative 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Only 3 to 5 hours of daylight occur in winter due to the town's high latitude and the tilt of the Earth's axis. So it's no surprise that only 500 people live there, and they have to constantly deal with temperatures that freeze their eyelashes and turn their saliva into icicles. In fact, the town's children occasionally have days of homeschooling due to concerns that they'll freeze if they go outside. Oymyakon's biggest claim to fame came in 1924 when it recorded the lowest temperature of an inhabited area in history, a lethal negative 96 degrees. But it's not just Oymyakon throwing temperature tantrums. The entire Sakha region is consistently in the negative 40s during winter, and it really is deathly cold. In 2020, 2 teenagers were driving from the city of Yakutsk to Margadan when they got lost. Temperatures plummeted to negative 50 that night, and tragically, one of the boys actually froze inside their car. You know what? I might just stick on a Christmas movie and imagine I'm in a winter wonderland instead. Australia. Nothing says luxury like sipping cocktails on a white sandy beach, and the Australian island of K'gari seems to fit that bill perfectly. It boasts over 150 miles of stunning beaches as well as tropical rainforests. But before you book your flights, be warned. This beautiful island is completely covered with unpredictable and dangerous animals. Firstly, venturing into the rainforest is a big no-no, as it's home to one of the world's most venomous species of spider, the K'gari funnel web. Its venom is reportedly 6 times more lethal than its more common cousin, the Sydney funnel web. And for context, the Sydney spider bite can be fatal in just 15 minutes. So if you get bitten by one of these critters, you won't even live long enough to find out if you developed superpowers. And the dangers don't stop at Land's End. You can encounter sharks at lots of beaches, but swimming and surfing at K'gari is downright discouraged because its great whites and bull sharks are known to hang around in the shallows right by the beach. Even if you manage to dodge them, the water is also filled with tiny Irukandji jellyfish, one of the smallest and most venomous jellyfish in the world. Its incredibly painful sting can be fatal if not treated with medical attention straight away. So, on an island that has no lifeguards or hospitals, a dip in the ocean could cost you your life. Back on land, even the puppies on the island are deadly because it's filled with around 250 dingoes, a wild dog-like animal endemic to Australia. They can be particularly vicious, especially when provoked, so whatever you do, don't pet that dog. Despite all this, the island is populated by around 1,500 people full-time, and it enjoys some healthy tourism. But in January 2024, 6 people were stung by the Irukandji in just 4 days, and there have been tons of cases of dingoes chasing down tourists and giving them nasty bites. So although K'gari looks like my dream vacay in the photos, I think I'll stick to mainland Australia instead. Actually, let's just skip the whole country. Highest highway. I'd say I'm pretty good at driving, but if you travel to India, you'll find a road that's so dangerous it can cause the world's safest drivers to crash. The unaffectionately nicknamed Death Road has all the sheer drops and sharp turns of a Mario Kart track. But unlike Rainbow Road, you won't be lifted back onto the path if you fall off. Its official name is the Hindustan-Tibet Highway, and it stretches 300 miles from Andala to Kaurik, near the Tibetan border. The route is surrounded with beautiful mountains and temples, but don't get distracted by the view because its twists and turns are no joke. Its highest point is Shipkila Pass, which stands at 15,000 feet above sea level, and the road is bordered by sheer 1,000-meter cliffs. To make matters worse, much of the road doesn't have any railings or protection for your vehicle, and even when there are barriers, they don't look very strong. The highway was built around and blasted through the mountains, and the area is incredibly prone to landslides, meaning giant rocks could come crashing down on your car at any given moment. Furthermore, buses run up some legs of the path, and if you meet one on your drive, you might have to reverse to give them room to pass. Or you could both go tumbling to the ground below. Yeah, consider this cursed road completely out of my comfort zone. Hazardous hike. When vacation planning, most of us tend to avoid traveling to places that are known for being dangerous. But some thrill seekers actively choose to visit treacherous locations to take part in death-defying sports like rock climbing. The sport involves scaling the world's steepest cliffs, and most climbers use ropes and a harness to stop themselves from falling to the ground below. But if a wall is too big to climb in a single day, the climbers will often camp by attaching hammocks or tents to the cliffside with metal bolts and ropes before bedding down for the night. Yeah, I think I'll stick to my hotel. One of the most popular American peaks to climb is the Half Dome, a rock formation in Yosemite National Park that tops out nearly 5,000 feet above the valley below. The face of the dome is a very famous climb, but you don't have to be a climber to ascend the rock, because 50,000 hikers turn up every year to reach its peak via a set of walkways and cables running up its smoother side. I know which route I'd choose, but surprisingly, hiking up the rock isn't necessarily safer. You see, you use the cables to pull yourself between 2x4 planks that act as steps, but the ascent is steep, reaching a 45-degree angle for the last 400 feet. So if you slip and fall out of the cable section as you climb, it could easily be the last mistake you ever make. From 2005 to 2020, there were 291 accidents and 140 search and rescue missions around the hike, with 25 hikers losing their lives on the walkways from slipping. In 1985, 5 hikers were even struck by lightning during the ascent due to the Half Dome's high elevation. So whether you're hiking up its side or camping on its face, the Half Dome is a pretty dangerous place to visit, and personally, I'd stick to snapping photos from the ground below. Ireland's Island. Calling all Star Wars fans, you might recognize this remote island from the movies, but can you guess which scenes took place here? Well, if you're picturing an aged Luke Skywalker teaching Rey about the Force, then you'd be absolutely right. But this island sanctuary isn't really in a galaxy far, far away. See, Skellig Michael is a rocky outcrop 8 miles off the coast of County Kerry, and although it's famous for being featured in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, that's not all it's known for. A 6th century Christian monastery stands near the top of one of its peaks 750 feet above the ocean. And to reach it, you have to climb 600 rock steps with very few handrails to help you. But it rains a lot in Ireland, so there's a huge risk of slipping off the slick steps. In 2009, an American tourist fatally fell after losing his footing on the climb and falling to the rocks below. 5 months later, another tourist also passed after slipping on the same ledge, showing just how treacherous the hike can be. Additionally, if you injure yourself during the climb, it's extremely difficult to get help. The island has no medical service, drinking water, or phone reception, leaving you pretty stranded. Furthermore, there's no Jedi waiting at the summit to help you, so as much as I'd want to visit Luke's hideaway, I think the 600 steps would finish me off. I can barely make it up the 2 flights to my apartment. Natural knives. The world is full of beautiful woodlands, but in Madagascar you'll find a forest like no other, because the entire thing is made out of rocks. See, Singidebamaraha National Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site that's filled with giant limestone spikes that are razor sharp to the touch. The stones can reach up to 330 feet high, and they first sprang into being 200 million years ago when the area was a lagoon with a limestone seabed. Later on, tectonic activity elevated the seabed and sea levels fell, leaving the rock exposed. Over time, rain then eroded this limestone bed into columns before wearing them down until they had sharp points. Tsingy loosely translates to where you cannot walk barefoot because the weathered stone is so sharp that it can cut straight through skin and clothing. Researchers have described navigating through the stone forest as climbing amid giant skewers, and on one expedition a scientist briefly knelt down, which left him with a limestone spike in his knee and a 2-day trip back to the nearest hospital. These razor-sharp obelisks are densely packed together, making a large area of the park inaccessible to humans. This also means that it's full of undiscovered species, and every time a research team has ventured into the limestone, they've found an average of 5 new species of animal. Man, visiting sounds like an ecologist's dream. If they manage to avoid becoming a human meat skewer, of course. Drop Dead Gorgeous. I'm terrified of heights. Like, can't even sleep in the top bunk terrified. So visiting the World's End Cliff in Sri Lanka would be my worst nightmare. This unprotected 4,000-foot drop boasts beautiful views of the surrounding Horton Plains National Park, but it can be deadly when you're distracted. Getting to the top involves a 4-hour hike along a rocky path which would leave anyone with wobbly legs. But no matter how tired you are, you have to watch your step because one wrong move could leave you tumbling over the cliffside. In 2015, Dutch tourist Mamatho Lendis actually tripped and fell off the cliff whilst taking pictures of his wife. He tumbled for 130 feet before getting tangled in some vegetation on the cliffside. The plants saved his life and left him with minor injuries, but unfortunately others haven't had Mamatho's enormous luck. There have been several fatal accidents at the site, and in 2011 an Australian tourist called Christopher Plither tragically lost his life when he tripped and fell whilst trying to take a photo of the view. Man, the cliff might be called World's End, but it'll certainly be your life's end if you're not too careful. And to be honest, I think I'll pass. A 4-hour hike is bad enough, but one that could cost you your life? Not my idea of a nice day trip. Hottest hot tubs. With its rainbow-colored hot springs and famous geysers, Yellowstone is one of the most beautiful national parks in the USA. But looks can be deceiving, and America's prettiest picnic spot is also one of its most dangerous tourist destinations from its terrain to its wildlife. In 2015, a woman and her daughter were visiting the park when they decided to snap a selfie with a bison that was just 6 yards away. But as they turned their backs to the animal, it unexpectedly charged at them and tossed the mother into the air. Fortunately, she survived the attack and was treated for minor injuries, but she's one of Yellowstone's luckier victims. The park's famous springs aren't to be messed with either, and although they look like delicious Forbidden Mountain Dew, going for a brief dip can result in major injury or even death. A tourist called Colin Scott found this out for himself in 2016 when his family went to Yellowstone to hot pot, a practice that involves using thermal springs as natural hot tubs. There are hot springs around the world that are suitable for swimming, like the Blue Lagoon in Iceland, and some of Yellowstone's pools are cool enough for hot potting, but the entire park sits atop an active volcano, so its magma-heated geysers are much hotter at around 200 degrees, and some of the springs in the hotter parts of the park have been known to reach 459 degrees. Scott and his sister clearly weren't aware because they climbed over a protective barrier to enter the Norris Geyser Basin, and as Scott walked past a hot spring, he slipped and fell into the 212-degree water. His demise was instant, and by the time officials arrived to help, just a few parts of his head and torso were visible in the water. They couldn't rescue his remains, and the extreme heat coupled with the incredibly acidic nature of the spring completely dissolved them by the following morning. All that was left was his wallet and flip-flops. But unfortunately, Scott isn't a one-off, and he joins a list of an estimated 22 people who have passed away in Yellowstone Springs. Man, if I ever find myself at Yellowstone, best believe I'll be staying behind the barriers. The only thing I want to melt on my vacation is my ice cream. Poison plants. A walk around a park is a lovely way to spend an afternoon, and the gardens at Alnwick Castle in England seem like the perfect place for a picnic. But this park isn't everything that it seems, because one of its sections will have you walking straight into a death trap. See, the castle's poison garden is one of the most dangerous places in the world, because it's home to 100 different kinds of toxic plants. Touching or ingesting some of them can give you nasty stings or cost you your life, and its deadliest residents include hemlock, deadly nightshade, and the castor oil plant. The latter is often considered the most poisonous common plant on the planet, as just 2 millionths of an ounce of the ricin toxin in its beans is enough to wipe out a human weighing 160 pounds. So how did this lethal garden come to be? Well, it was officially opened in 2005 by the Duchess of Northumberland, Jane Percy, who owns the 12-acre grounds of Alnwick Castle. She opened it to educate people on toxic plants and teach them how they cause death, which is a worthy cause. But most of these plants are grown completely out in the open, allowing any curious child or dumb adult to reach out, grab them, and receive a sting or potentially lose their life. Man, whatever you do, don't take a whiz in the bushes here. Brave the Cave. In the comics and movies, Superman's secret headquarters is a giant crystal palace called the Fortress of Solitude. But whilst this setup is a product of movie magic, I was pretty shocked to discover that a real-life crystal fortress actually exists about 1,000 feet beneath a mountain in Chihuahua, Mexico. The appropriately named Cave of Crystals was discovered by miners looking for ore deposits back in 2000. When they broke through the wall of the cavern, they stumbled upon a space that looked just like Superman's digs, with crystals that were up to 3 feet wide and 40 feet in length. See, crystals are formed when atoms or molecules in a liquid bond together in a repeating lattice pattern. If the temperature drops and the liquid cools, the pattern is locked into place, creating a solid structure. Researchers have discovered that around 26 million years ago, magma pushed through a fault line in the Earth's crust, causing the rock above it to bulge upwards and form the Sierra de Nica mountain. This allowed mineral-rich waters to seep into a cavern in the newly formed mountain, and over time they cooled and their molecules solidified, forming into giant crystals over a span of around 1 million years. This created the beautiful cave, but unfortunately it's far too dangerous to visit. Firstly, it still sits over an underground magma chamber, so its interior is 122 degrees with a humidity level of 90%. In this insufferable humidity, sweat has no cooling effect, so humans can only stay inside for 10 minutes before passing out and passing away from overheating. Furthermore, the air is so humid that when you inhale, it will condensate and turn to water inside your lungs, slowly causing you to drown. As a result, the cavern can't be visited by tourists, and scientists who study it have to wear special refrigerated suits with breathing respirators. Even then, the amount of condensation in the cave makes the surfaces extremely slippery, so they need to tread lightly to avoid tumbling onto the sharp crystal surface. So ultimately, you can't visit the cave unless you become a researcher, and even then you'll never be allowed to enter in your favorite Superman costume. So what's the point? Life on Mars. If you've ever dreamed of taking off in a spaceship and visiting another planet, you might not have to travel so far after all. We have our own extraterrestrial landscape right here on Earth, and it's called the Danakil Depression. This vibrant wonderland stretches for 3,800 square miles across Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti, and its unique terrain is stunning. But don't make plans to visit, because it's one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. See, the depression is one of the lowest places in the world at 330 feet below sea level, and parts of it stand over magma flowing just under the surface. This makes it one of the hottest places on Earth too, as its temperatures regularly soar between 95 to 130 degrees. Furthermore, whilst the desert is easier to get to than deep space, it's full of acidic thermal springs that are as inhospitable as any alien planet. The magma-heated water can reach over 200 degrees, and some of the pools have a pH level of 0.2, which makes them almost pure acid. You definitely don't want to fall in, but interestingly, these extraterrestrial hot tubs are populated by aliens, because they're the most acidic places on Earth in which life has been found. In 2017, scientists discovered that bacteria have adapted to live inside them, and they were so shocked at the discovery that they've since used it as a guide to determine how life could develop on other planets like Mars. Their vibrant green coloration comes from the presence of copper salts, but these aren't Danakil's only notable pools. Ketale Pond isn't as acidic, but it has a salinity content of 43%, making it the saltiest body of water on Earth. The pool also sits above magma chambers, which release carbon dioxide into the water through fractures in the ground. As a result, the pond emits huge amounts of CO2, and the bodies of insects and birds that have suffocated from the emissions are often scattered nearby. In fact, if a human came within 12 inches of its banks, they'd choke on CO2. So the waters of Danakil are so toxic that you can't even approach them, let alone go in for a dip. Bikini bombs. Bikini Atoll might sound like somewhere that SpongeBob and Patrick would hang out, but it's actually a set of 23 islets in the Marshall Islands that encircle a giant lagoon. But as idyllic as it looks, this Pacific Ocean paradise is actually highly radioactive. See, the U.S. Army took over the Marshall Islands during World War II, and in 1946, Bikini Atoll became the location of an operation that tested nuclear bombs for 2 whole decades. When the U.S. Army moved in, the 166 indigenous residents were relocated to the nearby Rongerik Atoll before being moved again to Kili Island, an area 1/6 of the size of Bikini with barely any resources. Meanwhile, the Army settled in, and the first test took place on July 1st, 1946, as a 20-kiloton nuclear bomb was dropped onto the lagoon from a plane. From then on, Bikini was the site of many nuclear firsts. On July 25th, they triggered the world's first underwater nuclear explosion, which turned the lagoon's water radioactive and sunk 8 empty ships. Then in 1954, one of the first American hydrogen bombs was dropped, and a miscalculation made it far more powerful than intended. The resulting explosion yielded 15 megatons of power, making it 1,000 times stronger than the bomb dropped at Hiroshima, and still the largest nuclear test in U.S. history. In fact, 3 of Bikini's islands were completely vaporized by the blast, and the nuclear fallout reached a Japanese fishing boat 80 miles away, giving the 23 men on board radiation sickness and taking one's life. After 23 tests, the operation finished and the indigenous population was moved back in the late 1960s. But the detonations had flooded the islets with radiation, and by 1978 the residents there were evacuated again due to increasing rates of radiation sickness. They were sent back to Kili Island, and today around 400 people still live there, largely surviving on imported food. The U.S. has since tried to clean up the atoll and allow resettlement, but the radiation level in the earth, groundwater, and coconuts is still far too high to be considered safe. So while the atoll actually is the namesake of SpongeBob's Bikini Bottom, the real islets aren't inhabited with pineapple houses, and for now, it looks like this tropical paradise might never have permanent residents ever again. Man, the earth really is deceivingly deadly, and I'm definitely going to camp in my backyard for my next vacation. Which dangerous location did you find the scariest? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.